So welcome back to another episode. And Lara, I think it has been a while since we did our last recording, right? Almost more than a month ago.
Yeah.
And I think that time we're kind of talking about when the Straits of Hormuz was being closed, right? And it is still being closed after more than 1 month. And so I thought today we can kind of look at the happening around, maybe domestically and also overseas. I mean, there are kind of interesting development, right, all around. Back home, you have rumors of maybe a general election coming up. Have you been hearing rumbling of that?
Yeah, a bit here and there, but it's also a bit it will come as a bit of a surprise, I suppose, because given that the Prime Minister himself, I'm not sure what he's exactly doing. So there's a lot of how do I say? Like it seems like there is a lot of politics at play. I mean, he himself was persecuted and yet he's also doing the same thing and to his former right hand man.
Yeah, I in fact I just saw like a short video clip. Nazmi, right, who was of course also a former cabinet member, and he came out and kind of like asking questions about the investigation into Rafizi. Of course, his assistant James Chai also was. In fact, so ridiculous, right? That early reports they were kind of saying that he's like Jolo 2.0, which kind of like I don't know. Does it seem a bit overhanded from of course, we know the working of government is very complicated, and there are different advisors, there are different hand, and even if you look at what's happening with America, with all the policy, a lot of people want to blame Trump for everything. Of course, he made the final decision, but he has a lot of advisors. He's given options all the time, and I think maybe it's the same for Prime Minister Anwar, but with Rafizi and Gan, it seems personal because it's PKR. And you always see the gang, right? Rafizi gang, I think about 6, 7 of them, member of parliament, quite sizable. Do you think? Do you think it can be? Do you think they do make an impact?
Yeah, I do think so because I mean, even if you just look at maybe there are certain disgruntled voters that might be, they are already unhappy with how the government is actually taking care of like domestic issues, domestic concerns, and then you have this few people who actually quite a lot of PKR voters are very much like looking up to, and then you see like two different factions. So I guess it will kind of like cost the party a bit. I mean, it's not like it's a small impact that is negligible to be like just discarded, but I feel this part, I think the Prime Minister probably is a bit concerned. So that's why there is something quite personal. So, but it's kind of ironic, I feel. I mean, if it really is like a sort of personal vendetta sort of agenda that is at play, and I would say he's very ill advised.
So then there's of course the whole issue with Negeri Sembilan, and in fact, I was just seeing some of the legal commentary, right? And somebody was asking, do we have a constitutional crisis? And I think one former court appeal judge said, well, it's not crisis yet, but there is a constitutional issue that's happening because of the uniqueness of Negeri Sembilan's constitution in terms of how they can elect their sovereign. But you can't help but to see that there is a political play behind it, right? Because Negeri Sembilan was, of course, used to be the stronghold for UMNO. You still have you still have Muhammad Hassan, and of course KJ used to come from there. And so there are a lot of kind of big players, UMNO big players who kind of call Negeri Sembilan their home. So do you think it's like a proxy kind of thing, like kind of initiated by UMNO?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it's a bit like, it felt a bit like the Perak constitutional crisis where you, you, there's like various royal families that are coming together, and then before long you see consolidation of power, dependent on how they are showing support to the government. So I feel there is a lot of this sort of dynamics that are very unique to Malaysian situation because we have a constitutional monarch. I mean, it's kind of similar to the UK, yet it's also very different in the sense that there are so many, it's like they are on rotational constitutional duty where I don't think you see it anywhere else in the world.
You know, whenever we talk about the Rukun Negara, right, and talking about the ranking, and they always say, constitution versus the king, which is higher. And I remember when we were younger, probably because we grew up in Mahathir's time, right, and he was really kind of showing his fist to the royalty. So I don't know, when I was at least in primary school and even in secondary school, we always understood that the monarchy is subject to the constitution. And so we get, of course, later on, since I myself is a law student, then you get the understanding that they act on the advice of government. But of course, Malaysia, the monarchy, the sultan, they are different because the constitution did give them more power compared to, let's say, the UK monarch. So the ability to appoint prime minister and things like that. So, but over a period of time, did you feel like there is, because you look at the trend, right, towards like, you look at people like Zaid Ibrahim, all those people, they kept on talking about Malay unity. And I just find it so ridiculous because you have the Malay dominance in every area of the country for so long. And yet, what unity are you talking about? You are basically in control of civil service, everything. And yet they want, almost like they want to push the monarchy, the monarch to have more power. I mean, I see there is a movement towards that. And that's why you can see, the police will always say, don't talk about the 3R issue and things like that. But every now and then I find people who are like, they're quite supportive of monarch being able to appoint prime minister and things like that. Do you think there is a danger there when we try to go above what is the constitution norm for this country?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it will definitely push a nation into becoming a lawless nation because you have law where all of us are supposed to be abiding by the civil law, and yet there is also a camp that is pushing for like Sharia law, whereby you begin to see very similar thing as what has happened in Iran like 47 years ago. And it's almost like there is a civil law, yet there is also a clerical leadership that is trying to push for the extreme. I mean, you can say what you want about the religion, but the thing is, you can't help but thinking if you try to merge an identity with religion, that's where when the line is blurred, I felt that there is a danger in pushing certain religious ideology on commoners, especially those who are not practicing the same religion. So then you begin to think, hey, how about the freedom of religion? How about our freedom of expression? How about the freedom to worship? So all these things become something that is like in a muddy gray area if we're not careful. I mean, because you can't separate the king from the protector of the religion itself. So how can then you impose, when you impose like a certain, I feel when the king is symbolic of a certain religion and you begin to impose that on people, I feel there is also a push behind the scene that is actually pushing for like Sharia law to be ruling in this nation. And I think it can become very, very dangerous because look at what has happened in Iran.
I mean, you think about political party like PAS, they don't even hide their intentions. They really want the Sharia law to be the dominant law of this country. But then we go back to what is the original intent of 1957 when Malaya was given independence. What was the original purpose in 1963 when four nations come together to form Malaysia? So that would be the the bigger context of things, of course, when you look at the political dynamic right now, like Prime Minister, I mean, of course, the current Prime Minister, but even future Prime Minister, they cannot just ignore the wishes and desire of the Borneo nations. But the thing is, that's why on one hand, if we continue to have this Borneo dynamic, I hope I'm correct that this dynamic will be a restraining force in terms of we don't go into we don't tip over the religious unbalance, because that's what Malaysia was supposed to be, a multiracial nation, right? And how can you have a multiracial nation when you want to have a certain kind of race and religious superiority? And look at what happened recently. State representative in Selangor was talking about, because the Sultan say cannot have pork not farming. What was the word they use? Not farming. You don't farm pork, right? I mean, it's like, you can't
farming.
Pork processing or yeah, actually it's farming. Yeah, but anyway, of course she said that in the legislative house and things like that. But I don't understand why it became a hoo-ha, because the advice of the Sultan is an advice, and it is still subject to the constitution of the state. It is subject to the advice of Menteri Besar. I don't find this controversial at all, and but that's the thing. People want to take advantage of that. I mean, the king, the Sultan, they have every right to voice out their opinion, but that doesn't mean it's law.
Exactly.
And this is the thing that as a nation, I feel like we lack the maturity to discuss this kind of issue, and that's why, coming back to Prime Minister, I kind of recalled the first few episodes we did after he became Prime Minister, and after the initial honeymoon, then he was like pandering to the Malay votes again and again, and but it didn't help him, right? I mean, he kept losing by-election here and there, and so and now Negeri Sembilan kind of thing, it's kind of biting him. And look at what Zahid recently said, well, Barisan Nasional may go solo and things like that, which I think is not a bad thing. I just cannot imagine Madani all will be like, because so many parties are in Madani, we all don't fight each other. Then who is fighting against who in general election? Kind of absurd, right? So, but is this really working for Prime Minister, you think?
I don't think so. I felt like maybe there is a certain sense of disillusion in the perspective of, I guess, when he was brought in the 80s, in the 70s. I mean, it was during a time when like religious rights were very much emphasized, I feel, at that time. And perhaps it's like seeing maybe with what is happening, especially I think when he takes on the helm of the leadership, you begin to see the war broke out in Middle East, and at the end of the day it boils down to religion as well. Maybe he's somewhat triggered by this whole incident, and it's sort of like causing him to come to that place of having to decide, do I continue this my identity, in the sense that I was brought in to quote unquote protect a certain religious right of the people, and here maybe he's seeing it as a full circle and actually coming to that place of like, just, well, I mean, I'm here, that's what I was advocating for all these years of my life, and I'm a principled man. I don't know. I mean, he could be thinking somewhere along the line, and I just felt like there's just too much coincidence to feel like it is not part of him.
Actually, you brought a very, very interesting point, because because the other day you were just talking about how he was always wanting to kind of solve the poverty issue, and the whole poverty issue kind of intertwined with the religious issue, and of
Yeah,
course,
and it's not just like urban poverty. I mean, you can talk about poverty at so many levels, and Malaysia has been trying to eradicate poverty at all levels since the 70s. I mean, since you had the racial riot. But he specifically was very much interested in rural poverty, and I feel maybe there is a certain part of him that felt injustice.
Yeah, so when you talk about the emphasis on rural poverty and also the fact he was brought in as a president of ABIM, to give Barisan Nasional some sort of credential in light of the Iran Revolution. We're talking about early 80s, right? Especially during that time, PAS was on the rise. And when you say that, it kind of made me think, was that his real identity? And later on, of course, when he was kind of pushed aside by Mahathir, then he went into Reformasi. And it's almost like Reformasi was not his real identity, but that earlier part of the racial, religious, and the rural poverty, those are his real passion. And maybe that's why we're seeing what is being manifest right now.
Yeah, I suppose like Trump, he advocates peace through strength. I feel to a certain degree our prime minister perhaps advocates for peace through religion.
Absolutely. I mean, you just have to look at Malaysia posturing during, after the October attack by Hamas. And it was like a very dangerous time for us because, like he didn't directly, I mean, of course, every time if somebody from US challenge him directly, then he will back down because he knows how to play the international game. But when he is unguarded, he will be like, kind of like, I'm almost like a supporter of Hamas like that. And of course, the way they frame it is Palestine. They always use Palestine. Then you see the same thing with Iran. And that's why I'm like, with Iran, it's even more difficult because Iran is attacking Saudi, is attacking Emirates, is attacking Bahrain, Oman. And that really, at the end of the day, is because Iran is considered, like a symbolic power of Islam. Of course, with Saudi, they are two different Sunni and Shia kind of school. But Malaysia is not even on that camp. And why, it's like there is this a pandering to the whole Iran kind of thing. You can feel that. Then of course, if we talk about Iran, you have another category of people, which is those people who are brainwashed by CCP. So, in fact, if people read the news very carefully, the one that is under a lot of pressure is China at the moment. But people don't want to see that, and they kept saying, Trump is walking into a mine. But it is. I think he's not concerned about it, and he can afford to wait. And the other thing, I mean, now we kind of segue to the American politics, because have you heard another narrative, right, saying that because of Iran war and because gasoline, I mean, we use the American term now, gasoline is kind of, they say during Biden's time, I mean, this is the most ridiculous statement. They say during Biden's time, gasoline went almost 5, and that's why he lost the election. And now they say, well, gasoline is almost 5 again, and that's why Trump will lose the election. So, but CNN is the one yesterday, I think, I can't remember the analyst, and he was saying that, look, those of you who say Trump lost support from the Republican are simply wrong. Because a lot of people don't understand the last election, how Trump won. He got 40% solid MAGA. Then the other 12% come from undecided and also disgruntled Democrats, and loosely they call them the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, RFK, Joe Rogan, those kind of people. So yes, you get a bit of shakiness from those people because they were originally Democrats anyway. But the core Republican, I mean, you look at recently the primary in Indiana and things like that, all the Mike Pence people were wiped out. So I think it's just, if people read CNN or Huffington and things like that, then you're going to think that Trump's rating is so low. But whereas you look at all the European leaders, Stammer, you look at the Chancellor of Germany, Macron, even Meloni, their rating are way below Trump in their own country. But anyway, that's one of the things that kind of interests me of late.
Yeah, another thing is because since we're kind of like on this sort of topic, I do feel like the one of the recent U.S. Supreme Court like it strikes down the race-based
Very interesting.
redistributing map in Louisiana. I thought that was very interesting because it could be a case study for Malaysia as well. Because I mean, obviously we don't have like a very race-based map sort of, but still it's very close to that, I suppose.
I was just thinking, remember we were talking with David and, doing the dinner, I think last week when we didn't do our recording. And what is this like, we have the boundary kind of drawn by EC, right? And you know how they draw it? It's really in favor of the government on the day. And did you remember previously we saw a leak of Sarawak redrawing, but it's not even official yet because it looks like so lopsided, so in favor of GPS. And so but the US system, I mean, from the case now that's a really good case, the Louisiana case. I think for people who wanted to study how American do their redrawing or election boundary, very interesting because every 10 years there's a department who will do a census, population census, and based on that official census, all the states can redraw their boundary. So let's say, for example, here we both stay in Taman Desa now, we're in what Seputeh, right? So let's say a new census come out and say, oh, the population actually here is 200,000. So 200,000 should be like what, 2 member of parliament seat, but we know that the imbalance in Malaysia is very severe. But in US, they had to follow the law. But then you have this, the Democrats have been kind of redrawing based on race, so they always have super majority black area, and that's how they always steal 1 or 2 seats in very conservative. And so the Supreme Court kind of strike it down now.
But it's kind of interesting because I mean, when you think about all these sort of things, and we talk about like nation watch, nation building so much, and it's really in a way, it really the sort of decision that we choose today. It may give us a slight comfort in our time, but it could cause like generations to come where they really suffer the consequences. So I feel it's very difficult for people who say that, hey, I'm not interested in politics because politics are dirty. It's very difficult to say that your lives are separated from that because government affairs are in every part of our lives. Like you have tax, you have food, you have like the prices of the fuel. Everything is like so controlled. So how can we then say that we play no part in the government affairs? Because how we vote is how we determine our lives are going to be.
Absolutely. And I think in a way, what's happening around the world now, and the other day, I was just reading how Prime Minister was saying, I know everyone is in very tough spot, but we have limited capacity to help. So, this is the lesson of handout. This is the lesson of socialism. As Margaret Thatcher famously said, eventually the money runs out.
Yeah, I mean, and did you also see recently that there was some economists that tried to say that, hey, if you
Tax the
don't,
rich.
yeah, no, if you don't give fuel subsidy to the T20s, you're gonna save like what the government like what 1.3 billion a a month or day or something like that. So I felt it is. Then there were a lot of backlash by saying that, but T20s are the ones contributing the most tax and they don't get to enjoy all these things. So it's a bit ridiculous who's funding the government at the end of the day.
Because the whole issue with subsidy is not subsidy. Of course, subsidy itself is costing billions and things like that, but it's also the fact that the subsidy probably are stolen. And you talk about stolen diesel and things like that. And that's why one of the economists, Jeffrey William, previously he was suggesting that, look, you shouldn't subsidize. You should just sell the petrol at market price. And then those who deserve to have help, you get some cash rebate. And because it's like, hey, you want to prove that you are in a bad position, then prove it through your tax filing. So if you, I mean, that's the thing about why people are complaining. So many people are not even filing their tax. So if you don't file your tax, sorry, too bad. That means, of course, you say, oh, I earn so little that I don't even need to pay tax. But But if you file and say your amount is so little, you don't need to pay tax, probably you'll be in a category that can get the cash rebate. So, I mean, that's why you say, what's the figure for subsidy per month? Or it's in the billions, and you know there's just some leakage here and there, and yeah, but the backlash, because I think that was one of the argument, right? That everyone pay tax, everyone deserve to get subsidy.
Yeah, but actually, I don't personally favor that sort of argument as well. But I do think yes, those who are really really deserving definitely need some sort of help, because otherwise it would be very difficult for them to break out of the poverty cycle. Because I mean, given how we have systemic corruption, then we also have systemic poverty. No doubt. I mean, this group of people really really do need help to even get a shot at life. But so I think I'm more in favor of, hey, I mean, if you work hard, you deserve to be rewarded. So I feel like that part of principle of life shouldn't be taken away from the people, because otherwise, who are gonna? I mean,
What's the motivation, right?
exactly. I mean, people are in it for money, whether or not you like it, and money is a useful tool. So not saying that you love money so much that it blindsided you, but you do need money to function. But how do you mitigate all these losses? How do you mitigate all these wastages? It's true. I guess you do need to have a sort of audit system that actually is workable for every party. You may not necessarily need to please the emotions of the people, but you do need to have something that is workable, something that is transparent, so that people are not so agitated at. I mean, we're not trying to catch every corruption cases here and there. I mean, there are so many to catch, but how are you gonna fight all the warfare at once?
Yeah, and that's why recently I mean, of course, Rafizi is already kind of on the other side and criticizing government more, and he because remember he has the Padu system which wasn't implemented, because the Padu system is really the one that kind of will categorize who can get the help. But now I think when they wanted to implement that, they were just so afraid of the backlash. So eventually everyone gets 300 liter, and I think some people, depending where you work, you may not even use it. But of course, they kept saying, like, at least in Klang Valley, there's a lot of discussion on transportation also, but you also have been hearing, right, people, because of the Strait of Hormuz incident, how people are saying, Malaysia should have looked into renewable and things like that. I mean, I just find that so ridiculous, because the tag is not there at all. And I don't know, I kind of know a few EV user kind of having buyer's remorse.
But you do have like a. I thought it was kind of interesting, because out of this whole thing, you begin to see, hey, actually, Petronas is no longer a cash cow for the government. So I thought, I mean, as bad as it sounds, in a way, I felt maybe Malaysians do need to go through a period of pain before you could actually come back to that place of realizing, hey, actually, why not utilize the resources that we have in this nation and actually begin to maybe invest more heavily into processing of the crude oil and whatnot to actually boost out the GDPs of the nation.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at I think the last episode we talked about it, which is so many people were surprised that Malaysia was a net importer of crude oil. Then, of course, because usually they add in the natural gas, then it looks like we're a net producer and net exporter. Then all the national issue, brain drain, and we're losing competitiveness, and all this kind of thing is like, it's a reality check, right? Then, of course, when Trump unleashed the tariff war around the world, it exposed our system also, that we are actually a very protectionist kind of system. Look at our national car and things like that. So when you try to call someone, like you are being unfair, then look at our own system with halal certification and things like that. So I think I agree with you that we need a season of exposure, and fundamentally the country needs to decide, ever since May 13th and NEP, we have been, we talk about helping people, but it's just simply handout. And unless collectively people are willing to confront this issue, that the future will look quite bleak. And I was just looking at Southeast Asia, very, very interesting that almost no other country have petroleum subsidy like us.
Yeah.
Not Indonesia, not Vietnam, not Thailand, definitely not Singapore. Like paying through the roof, right? Singapore and Philippines. I was just talking to the caregiver, and she was like, the people are not driving because it's so expensive. But here, our Prime Minister is like, oh, we can give subsidy forever. I don't know. Are we in the alternate universe, not confronting with the reality because eventually the money runs out?
You tell me.
Oh well. Anyway, I think for our first episode back after a long while, I think we kind of cover the emotion part of it. So maybe the next few episodes we can kind of. I was just kind of thinking, what to talk about, because I do feel like there's a bit of political fatigue in Malaysia. Like, even when people talk about the Negeri Sembilan, people talk about potential GE in October, people are not really in the mood to talk about it. But I feel like we need to get people to think again why it is important and why their vote still counts, and the future is not set in stone. There is a potential to change for the better, but only if people are looking at the past and present properly, otherwise they will not be able to interpret correctly into the future.
True.
So maybe that would be some of the. So I guess we kind of have been doing different kind of thing, but I like what you've been saying. Nation Watch, right? It's really. I mean, you go to coffee shop, you go to Starbucks, you go to you talk about people complain about. I mean, that's a person seeing what's happening and try to interpret it. And I think we should encourage people to do more of that. Whether you can change. I mean, I think about people like us who voted for the current government, who kind of feel a bit disappointed. But you never know until you change, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, Madeni wasn't great, but would you prefer a Perikatan Nasional? Would you prefer a Borneo Prime Minister? I mean, we are both from Sarawak. We know a lot of people have this kind of desire, but I tell you, it may not be better, man. A Borneo Prime Minister may be worse. Actually, I think it will be worse given the current situation, because GPS is totally unreliable when it comes to national affairs. That is my personal view. But in future, let's say you get rid of GPS, you can have a Borneo Prime Minister. Fine.
Yeah, one step at a time.
One step at a time. But anyway, that's for future episodes. So I think we kind of run out of time already. So until next week, and we will try to be more regular from now onwards.
Yes, we should.
Okay, bye-bye for now.
Bye bye.